Hello, I'm Aoife Devitt, and welcome to 50Faces TV. This is an occasional video series made by 50Faces Productions. We wanted to sit down with some exceptional names in our industry to bring you an engaging, real-time conversation of their life on the ground in whatever area of the world they may be residing in this case, Dubai. I sat down with fellow Irishman David Moylan, founder of Fair Green Capital Partners, about his life in Dubai and why he thinks it's one of the most exciting capital raising environments ever right now. So David, can you paint for us the lie of the land a little bit in the Middle East and Dubai in particular? What kind of institutions do you come into contact with, and how do you find that they're thinking about allocating capital today?
The first thing I'll say is when I started spending more time in Dubai a few years ago, there was a very similar business energy to New York, which I didn't expect. The individual and the collective were very ambitious. And that makes sense, I suppose, given the trajectory of the country, the UAE, for over the last 52 years. What I noticed in the investing space is quite interesting. I would say they're maybe 20 years behind London and New York in terms of investment solution sophistication. And if you look at the Middle East, and maybe let's pick the UAE as a case study, it's a region over the last few years, it's had organic, endogenous and exogenous growth. And what I mean by that is, so organic, the amount of wealth that's there has increased because the capital markets have went up, especially in the last year, for looking at the S&P as a proxy. Endogenous, the place is growing with more and more people coming in there. So the business that is done there, there's more of it done there. And the exogenous is more wealth coming there because of the safety of the region, the lifestyle of the region, and I suppose the opportunity there as well. So they're the kind of inputs of large increases of wealth in different facets. What I've realized over the last 2 years in particular is the asset allocation will look something like this. Now, not for the sovereign wealth funds who do have access to, we say, good alternative strategies and sophistication, but it's focused on long-only equities, core plus fixed income, a strong bias towards real estate because it's performed very well. Outside that, there is a disproportionate amount of alternative strategies. Now, a rising tide carries all ships. So equities from, I suppose, March 6, 2008 have went up nearly every year, with the exception of two, and have beat their long-term average of about 10%. So if something's worked, you don't need to fix it, right? But as you know, and I know, you know a lot more than me because you've been around the block in terms of your investment career a little longer than I, but markets go in cycles. And what I think with the increased expected volatility for next year, uncertainty, combined with, I think 40% of the global elections are happening next year. So there's going to be some geopolitical instability. There's two wars going on at the moment. The need for alternatives is probably higher than ever, and their under allocation to it is quite noticeable for such a large pools of capital within the region.
And what kind of key differences do you see in terms of how they approach, say, alternatives allocations, time horizon, maybe other areas such as appetite for complexity?
Sure. So I think there's four, I suppose, segments I'll put them into, and then I can speak about the nuances of them. So as you mentioned, that at the top, we have the very big sovereign wealth funds. They have had access to sophisticated alternatives through the years, not as much as their US counterpart, but the bigger firms have went there and have won business. Beneath them, you have what we call institutional, so corporates, foundations and endowments, and they're constantly growing. They're very much underserved in terms of alternative strategies. Beneath that, you have an ever-growing number of ultra-high net worths who come into the region. And it's interesting, with the ultra-high net worths, they will have some of them quite a tendency to trade quite frequently through the private banks on commodities and gold and whatnot. And that's fine if it works systematically, but for my career, you're often going up against big asset managers who can do this with bigger resources. So you're facing an unfair advantage. You might win sometimes, but my view is if you put it into someone who does this repeatedly, it's a better solution. And then beneath that, you're in conjunction with the family offices, where there's more and more European family offices moving there. They will have an appetite for alternatives because they've had it in Europe, even though the offerings in the Middle East is not as advanced there at the moment compared to Europe, so to speak. And then beneath that, you have the private wealth platforms for, I suppose, high net worths and individuals there. Given that it's a tax-free regime, most people will accumulate excess I suppose, savings and look to invest it. But the suite of products is, I don't think it's as dynamic as it should be. And it's more important to have, I suppose, good diversification when equities in particular don't continue to rally as they can't every year. You know, there has to be pullback sometimes.
And how about some of the more speculative areas, such as, say, Bitcoin, digital assets? Do you find that the risk appetite is different on the ground there from what you've seen elsewhere?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question. So the answer is yes. So over here, we say traditional assets, long only equities, core plus fixed income. Over here, emerging asset classes and more volatile ones like digital assets, Bitcoin. So there has been a noticeable flow of funds into these. Obviously, they're extremely volatile. And my view is in the middle, or even more to this side, is alternative strategies that have been around for more than one market cycle, who have a repeatable process and have more CPU in terms of getting a systematic return in a non-correlated way. This investments work until it doesn't, right? And it's very risky. I'm contrarian when I look at investments. Money's hard to come by, and when you invest it, you should make sure you don't try to lose it. You want to get a return of your money firstly, and you want to get a return on your money thereafter.
And when it comes to actually having a local presence there, how important is it to have boots on the ground? And do you see many of the fellow allocators and asset managers look to put boots on the ground for themselves and actually develop a local presence?
Good question. So there's not a huge amount of boots on the ground from, say, US and European asset managers. Some of them will have an office there, and they'll put people in from London or US as they go through the roadshows. The thing about, I suppose, Dubai and the UAE is very relationship driven, and it's 80% expats. So a lot of the expats are in CIO roles, for example, in the corporates. And it's quite a small community in terms of being able to network and to meet them. What I found from my career, where the asset manager that was the most successful when I was there was PIMCO. I spent 3 years there, and we went from 1.3 trillion to 2 trillion in 3 years. And it used to hire, and still does, business development people who had very strong technical understanding. And my view of the Middle East is the ability for asset managers to put technically savvy salespeople there will yield a very high return on investment, because the ability to communicate the strategy builds trust, right? And you can make the argument with some capital allocators that the salesperson isn't selling to them, they're a natural buyer. So the ability, one, to connect with them, and two, to instill the communication of what the strategy is very important. And having a technical background with the salespeople, I think, is one variable that will increase success.
Thanks for watching 50 Faces TV.